Hey everyone, welcome to part 3 of my Blender beginner series, where today I'm going to be teaching you the basics of materials and lighting. Now this won't go super in depth in materials and stuff. It'll teach you the basics on how to use them, because I want to save the in-depth materials for when I teach nodes, because they can get a little bit confusing and complicated at times depending on what you're trying to make. So let's just go over the basics of materials and how they interact with lights and stuff, and how they interact with environments. So let's get started. So I'm going to be using Blender 2.8 for this, and the reason I'm saying that is because it will be different. Your starting material will be different if you're in 2.79 or below. If you're in 2.79 or below, I believe you have the diffuse shader as your default, and if you have Blender 2.8 or above, then you have principled. Now don't worry if you don't know what that means, but basically principled is like the cooler diffuse. So you can do a lot. The principle is what I like to call the all-in-one shader, and you can basically do anything with it. Diffuse is just a solid color, so that's what that is. So in Blender 2.8 and 2.79, the way to get to your materials is you can either go right here, and you should automatically have a material set for your default cube. But if you don't, you can go ahead and set one up by, let's just delete that, and just click new, and you should get your either diffuse or your principle, depending on which version you're using. I'm going to go over principled first. So if you are not using 2.8, you can go ahead and switch this to principled from diffuse. So the way to get into your actual node setup, because you could do some stuff in this, but you won't really do a lot in this. You'll mainly be working in your node setup. So if you go up here or down here, either one, and you get this little cross symbol, you can click and drag to duplicate the window. And now you have this duplicated view. Now the way to get to our actual shader setup is if you go over here to this little grid. In 2.79 it'll be the 3D viewport, just like always. In 2.8 it's called the shader editor, but in 2.79 or below it's called the node editor. So they're the same thing, but just they're different names in different versions. So if you go in the shader editor, you'll be able to see your shader that you have selected. So this right here is your actual material node, the actual thing that is being cast on this. And if you notice, it's connected to this surface. Now what it's doing is it's basically telling Blender, hey, use this material on the surface of this object, and since the material is applied on this object, then it knows what to apply. So if we go into rendered view, we can see that it's white because base color is white and stuff, but if we disconnect it, it'll just be this black because there's nothing applied to it. So I'm gonna just create another plane and just scale it up, just so you guys can see how the lighting interacts with it later. But we can see we have this this cube right here. So here, I'm gonna go over the principled shader first. I've already said that, but say it again. So base color is just the color of the object, so you can just change it to whatever you want. I'm going to leave mine white right now. Metallic is how metallic the object is. And you see right now it's like kind of like a rough metal kind of material. Your specular, I'm actually going to turn metallic down for now. Your specular is how much light the object can like absorb. So you can kind of see, I think if I turn this on black it'll be better. You see that turning it all the way down means that it's just black and it absorbs all light. And turning it up means it's just like some Crayola marker kind of black. So that's what that is. Specular tint, I don't really use that. Roughness is how rough your material is. So if I turn that all the way down, you can't really see it on this, except for if I go over here, it's reflecting the light. And it just makes it super glossy and reflective. So if you have like some like china or like pottery that's like really shiny and you want to make that, then that's how you do that. And also if you remember, when we turned on metallic, it had this just rough, but if we turn it all the way down, we can see that it's kind of, you can't really see it right here, but what if I add a area light? Yeah, it's metally stuff. What if I change the color? Yeah, you can see it's like a metal gloss thing going on here. See it diffuses it, or refracts it, I don't know, but it does something to it. So that's what that does. I don't really use any of these. except for transmission. We should turn roughness down or metallic down, roughness back up. So, you can make a glass shader with the principled shader by just turning transmission up all the way. Oops. And then changing the index of refraction, IOR, to 1.450 is already glass. But if you want like water, it'd be like 1.33. You can look up like what the index of refraction of certain things is. So that's the principled shader. You can also, if you have the Node Wrangler add-on, by going Edit Preferences and going to add-ons and just typing in Node, you'll see Node Wrangler. Just check that and click Save Preferences. It makes materials a whole lot better. If you select the principled and hit Control T, you get this, and you can add image textures and stuff to it. You can also do that with diffuse. You can do that with any shader actually. So that's how you apply texture to your shader. Next shader, diffuse. So, like I said, what did I just? Diffuse. Okay. Diffuse. So like I said, just your solid color, basic shader. So you can change the color again, and then you can change the roughness. And that's about it. That's all diffuse is good for. So I can see why they changed the default material, because nobody really wants to use just straight diffuse. I mean, unless you're like creating just a solid color object, then that's when diffuse would be handy. But you'd still use principled for that, because you can still have a lot more control. Before this, what you'd have to do is you'd have to add like a ton of like mix shaders and like, I won't be going over these in this like not that color ramps, and then like adding like if you want it to be like mixed with like any emission, or not emission, if you wanted it to be like more metallic, you have to just do a ton of stuff. It doesn't work. I don't know how to make a metallic shader out of nothing. I'm sorry. Well, that's that. Next thing we can go over is the glass shader, and this glass shader. Just your basic glass shader. Eevee is not very good with it. So if I enable screen space reflection, subsurface scattering, I go down to my material right here and then turn on screen space reflection. See, it's kind of like it kind of does it, but it doesn't really do it right. So mainly glass shaders are used in cycles because they're a lot better at glass. So if I just change this material to like blue, see it's like refracting and stuff with it. So that's the glass shader. Makes glass. I don't know why it does this, but if you add it in the node editor itself, the roughness will already be at 0. But if I come over here and let's say I remove this, right? Then I add another glass shader from here. The roughness is at 0.5, which threw me off the first time that I use this. Because unless you want like this frosted glass kind of look, you just turn the roughness all the way down. And it should automatically be like that because glass isn't very rough normally. So that's the glass shader. Next thing is the emission shader. Emission shader is one that I use a lot and one that's really handy, and it does exactly what it says. It's an emission. So if I change this to white or gray, I'm also going to turn my world settings all the way down to black. You see, it just emits light. It's literally a lamp, and you can turn like the strength up and stuff to this. And you can also like change the color. It's a rave. It's awesome. But that's what the emission shader does. You can also Control T to add a image texture to have it like emit light and stuff. So that's that. Trying to think of what other shaders that I use a lot. Let's look over here. Oh yeah, transparent I use a lot, and it just makes the object transparent. See, boom, it's gone. Wow, isn't that awesome? I use that to mix with a lot. So if I have like a black and white image and I want like the blacks or whites to be like transparent, then I just use a transparent shader. I also use volume. Volume is like literally what it says. Like, so if I have this, right, and then I add a diffuse for this, to diffuse some light, and then I add another cube, or that's a plane. I add another cube and just scale it up to where it covers our scene. Then I give this a material by going up here and clicking new. If I have this object selected, it adds a material to that object. I'm going to delete my principled and just add a volume absorption or volume scatter. And if I add it to the surface, right now we're in Eevee, so we have to check this little box as volumetric. Oh yeah, volume scatter. Anytime you're working with volume materials, just put that in volume. So now you can see that we have this volume, and it's like refracting the light or scattering the light and stuff. So that's really cool for scenes. I use it a lot in mine actually. So those are basics on materials. And now let's go over lighting. So lighting. Ooh. So make this white. Okay, and I'm gonna go into cycles for this because cycles is better for lighting, in my opinion. Where'd it be? Okay. So default on Blender, you would start with this 1 point light, but nobody ever uses that, so you can just leave it. So what I like to do in my lighting, well, actually, I'm not gonna go over that right now. I might, but lights are very complicated, or not. Lights aren't complicated. They're complicated to get right, but they're not complicated to use. So if we go to Shift A and we can go down here to light, and so we have a point light, which is just a point, and that's what you default start with. And then you have a sun, which simulates a sun, which if you're doing like an outdoor scene or something, then you could use that. A spotlight is just like a spotlight, you can see right there. And then what I use a lot is an area light. An area light is my best friend in Blender. So I'm going to be using an area light for simplicity's sake. So if we just move it right here, we can see that it illuminates all this stuff, and the shadow is right here. Okay, so the shadow is kind of sharp. It's not really sharp, but it's kind of sharp. The reason for that is our light source is very small. So if I go down here to this little light bulb, and then I change the size to maybe like 5, we can see that our light, our shadow isn't very sharp anymore. So unless the light is like directly supposed to be right up on the object, you don't want it to be sharp because that's not how shadows work. So if I want this, for like example, if I said like I wanted this scene to be rendered, and my light source was like way over here, I wouldn't want the shadow to look like this. Okay, because that's not how light works. It's really sharp and it's ugly and it doesn't work. So you just put that on like 5, or it depends on how soft or sharp you want your shadows to look. So that's that. And now also, I'm gonna add a principled shader to this cube actually. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna delete this cube. I don't know why. I'm gonna add a UV sphere. Okay, so I have this UV sphere, and I'm just gonna subdivide it a few times to make it look pretty. I went over this in modifiers video. I'm gonna shade smooth, so it's all pretty and stuff. I'm just gonna give this my last material, which is supposed to be principled. And we give it this, right? We see that our ball it's pretty cool. It's reacting to the light how it's supposed to and stuff. And if I turn roughness all the way down, you can see that now, and I'm actually going to change the color a little bit to show you more. You can see that now we have this reflection. And that's because we turned our roughness down. So you can kind of see better than using a cube of how roughness affects the object. So if I turn this up, all the way up, it's completely rough. Turn it all the way down, it's that. and roughness is like halfway, and the metallic is up. You can see that it gives it the metallic sheen that it's supposed to have. Roughness all the way down is like super shiny metallic. And then, like I was saying earlier, to make a glass shader, you just turn transmission all the way up, and that kind of makes glass shader, but it's blue right now. So if we just made it like white, yeah, turn the roughness down, we made a glass shader. Boom, haha. Okay, so that's that. And that's pretty much lighting, basically, and materials. Probably forgetting something, honestly, so if I do forget something, then just leave it in the comments below. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully you learned something about materials and lighting. This didn't go very in depth because I'm going to save that for my node tutorial, so keep watching for that. My name is Fizz. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.